Bitcoin is highly unstable, as we've all seen. I know there's the argument made by crypto bros where they're like, the line still goes up. You'll see it go like this, and like this, and like this, and like this, but it's still trending in an upward direction. I mean, it still is technically worth more now than it was when it started, and if it's dropped to about $18,000, it's still, I mean, Bitcoin used to be able to buy for $2,000, so the joke's on you, essentially. But if you're using that as the basis for generating yield, if your yield is going to be generated on speculation of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, yeah, that is probably the definition of one of the riskiest business ventures and one of the riskiest things you could throw your life savings into, especially being run by this moip over here. If this fucking moip is the one who's going to be taking your money, your hard-earned dollars, and then generating yield with it to make you more moip, well then, yeah, you probably have a problem. 1 week ago, as cryptocurrency prices plummeted, Celsius Network, an experimental cryptocurrency bank with more than 1 million customers, has emerged as a leader in the murky world of decentralized finance, or DeFi, announced it was freezing withdrawals due to extreme market conditions. Earlier this past week, Bitcoin dropped 15% over 24 hours to its lowest value since December 2020. Last month, Terra USD, a stablecoin, a system that was supposed to perform like a lot of conventional bank accounts but was backed only by a cryptocurrency called Luna, collapsed, losing 97% of its value in 24 hours, apparently destroying some investors' life savings. 89 years ago, Franklin D. Roosevelt signed into law the Banking Act of 1933, also known as the Glass-Steagall Act. It separated commercial banking from investment banking, Main Street from Wall Street, to protect people who entrust their savings to commercial banks from having their money gambled away. Glass-Steagall's largest purpose was to put an end to the giant Ponzi scheme that had overtaken the American economy in the 1920s and led to the Great Crash in 1929. Americans have been getting rich by speculating on shares of stock and various sorts of exotica, roughly analogous to crypto. These risky assets' values rose solely because of a growing number of investors put money into them. But at some point, Ponzi schemes topple against their own weight. When the toppling occurred in 1929, it plunged the nation and the world into the Great Depression. The Glass-Steagall Act was a mean of restoring stability. But by the 1980s, America forgot about the great trauma of 1929. As the stock market soared, speculators noticed they could make lots more money if they could gamble with other people's money, as speculators did in the 1920s. They pushed Congress to deregulate Wall Street, arguing that the United States financial sector would otherwise lose its competitive standing relative to other financial centers around the world. Finally, in 1999, Bill Clinton and Congress agreed to ditch what remained of the Glass-Steagall. As a result, the American economy once again became a betting parlor. Inevitably, Wall Street suffered another near-death experience from excessive gambling. Its Ponzi schemes began toppling in 2008, just as it had in 1929. The difference was this time the US government bailed out the biggest banks and financial institutions. The wreckage was contained. Still, millions of Americans lost their jobs, their savings, and their homes, and not a single banking executive went to jail. And, everyone who's having a hard time affording a home right now, is this maybe going to be an interesting time if we enter another recession and there's a whole bunch of foreclosures, and then there'll be a whole bunch more cheap homes on the market. It's a healthy system working healthily, you see? Which brings us to the crypto crash. The current chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, Gary Gensler, has described cryptocurrency investments as rife with fraud, scams, and abuse. In the murky world of crypto DeFi, it's hard to know who provides money for loans, where the money flows, or how easy it is to trigger currency meltdowns. There are no standards for risk management or capital reserves. There are no transparency requirements. Investors often don't know how their money is being handled. Deposits are not insured. We're back to the Wild West finances of the 1920s. Before the crypto crash, the value of cryptocurrencies had kept rising by attracting an ever-growing number of investors, some big Wall Street money, along with celebrity endorsements. But again, all Ponzi schemes topple eventually, and it looks like crypto is now toppling. Why isn't this market regulated? Mainly because of the intensive lobbying by the crypto industry. This is one of the shitty things when you have an entire industry that grows and grows at the hands of the very rich. I believe, 1,000 or less investors in crypto, they're known as whales, own approximately 40% of the entire cryptocurrency market. In Ether, it becomes even smaller. It's about 100 people own about 40% of the Ether market. The industry is pouring huge money into political campaigns, and it has hired scores of former government officials and regulators to lobby on its behalf, including 3 former chairs of the Securities and Exchange Commission, 3 former chairs of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, 3 former U.S. senators, 1 former White House chief of staff, and a former chair of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers advised crypto investment firm Digital Currency Group, Inc., and sits on the board of Block, Inc., a financial technology firm that is investing in cryptocurrency payment systems. If we should have learned anything from the crashes of 1920 2029 and 2008, it's that regulations of the financial market is essential. Otherwise, they turn into Ponzi schemes that eventually leave small investors with nothing and destabilize the entire economy. It's time for the Biden administration and Congress to regulate crypto. I agree. I could also see nothing happening, especially if you have incredibly wealthy lobbying groups now that are working on the behalf of the crypto bros, just to keep this whole cycle going. I can't recommend Dan Olson's video enough, NFTs and the problem with line going up, specifically because it just cuts like a warm knife through butter of the idea that someone doesn't understand crypto and that's why they don't like it. I don't know if anyone could watch the movie and walk away saying Dan didn't do his research. He doesn't really understand cryptocurrencies and how they operate. I think he did an exceptional amount of research. Or I could also recommend Mooncat's video on the same subject. When I interviewed Mooncat, she explained that the reason she actually ended up doing a video on this topic is because annoying crypto bros online kept saying that she was a stupid girl who didn't understand how this whole thing works. And so she was like, okay, fine, I will learn. She learned, and she's like, it's worse than I thought before. It's so much worse than I ever thought it was before. I'm going to put this video out. And that's how that one came to be. But basically the idea being, and NFTs are kind of the hyper example of this, that for a last fool standing scam, for the way for that to work is that you will need people to continuously pour money into an otherwise worthless asset. The tokens themselves, Bitcoin tokens, Ether tokens, don't have any inherent value outside of that which we put into it. So we put in fiat currency, we buy these tokens, and that gives those tokens their value, and then they will increase or decrease in value based on how much fiat currency is being poured into them. This whole system, especially if you have things like NFTs, which you want to sell for enormous amounts of money at a time, sometimes $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, in order to keep doing that, you need liquid cash to keep pouring in. Hence the idea of giving all these celebrities, Paris Hilton, Jimmy Fallon, their own NFTs. When they get their own NFTs for $300,000, $400,000, they then can talk about them, and they don't even have to disclose that the whole thing is an advertisement. Post Malone can throw it into a music video. Jimmy Fallon can just straight up change his entire Twitter into a fucking NFT promotional social media account, which he did. Up until a few days ago, possibly yesterday, his avatar was a picture of an owl NFT. He has now changed it to a picture of his family. I don't know if that has anything to do with the documentary that came out yesterday talking about how the Bored Ape Yacht Club is riddled with crypto fascism. I'm not entirely sure if that's why he made that decision, or maybe he's seen the writing on the wall and the idea of just doing a 24/7 promotion of NFTs on a social media account is kind of fucked up, and maybe he doesn't want to have any consequences for his actions. I can't say. It's all speculation at this, much like the market, the crypto market itself. So now we're seeing this massive crypto crash, and what exactly is the inevitable result of all of this? Similar to stock market crashes, there's going to be a very large amount of people who had smaller amounts of money inside it, because again, you need to keep pouring money in. There's a lot of people who I'm sure we've all had a good laugh at, who have put in their life savings into these kind of things, $20,000 into Doge, $10,000 into Doge, $5,000 into Doge, at a time when Doge was roughly worth about 32 cents. It's now worth about 4 cents. So they have seen an erosion of their life savings, and they're probably in quite dire straits. Meanwhile, the people who have a lot of money, the whales, who control the majority of the cryptocurrency market and can also manipulate it. People like Elon Musk can do that for no money at all. He just has to go on his Twitter account, type out, "Le epic Doge big chungus, what do you think? I still support this," and then boom, a couple handful of people will once again pour real money into buying Doge, and it goes from 4 cents to 6 or 7 cents, and then he can pull all of his money out at that point and make a cool little couple of $1 million. Again, these actions aren't regulated until the point of sale in both the US and Canada. So once you do sell your cryptocurrency, that's the point at which the US government or the Canadian government get to tax your gains, your profits on the currency itself.
Financial freedom. It's what everyone wants. The ability to not worry about money, the ability to flex on people, and also sit on a beach for some reason with a laptop, which I'm sorry is a dumb fantasy. Sand and keyboards do not mix. All you've done is give yourself a terrible experience with both. Sorry to go on that weird tangent, but also it needed to be said. The point is that everyone wants financial freedom, and many people look to cryptocurrency as a new way to get it, because nobody trusts the monopoly man controlling the money printerino anymore, and because of that, a lot of new people have been happy to step in and promise to be the solution, the new monopoly man, if you will, but a better one, sort of. Enter Celsius, who we're talking about today, a company that takes crypto and also lends it, that pitched itself as being a new place to put your money and borrow money. but that's kind of not a bank. It calls itself a new economy, an economy where, quote,
I'm really happy I just read that article before this. They're doing exactly what the US tried to separate banks from doing with Wall Street. But it's called a new economy. It's new, you see. We've taken the same ideas that actually ended up bankrupting America, and we've turned it into a fancy app. So give us your money, please, and we'll invest it for you.
financial freedom doesn't come with a price tag, which sounds about as believable as a diet pill that gets you a six-pack without the exercise. But even so, Celsius's pitch was undeniably effective, promising up to 10% a year on your money. Since they opened their doors in 2017, they've taken in...
I just want to throw this out there for anyone who doesn't invest on a regular basis. A 10% return on investment is fucking really, really good for people who want to invest their money into something long-term.
A grand whopping total of $25 billion worth in crypto. And for a while, things were going great. Right up until on June 12th, 2022, they suddenly collapsed without warning and froze withdrawals and went radio silent. And it has everyone wondering, how could this happen? Well, that is what we are trying to answer today. I've done a shorter video on this, which we'll link here, but this time we're going to go much deeper down the rabbit hole because I believe Celsius is unfortunately finished, insolvent, and I'm about to tell you why. It begins with one man and his vision.
You know, we need someone to help us with our financial accounts, with our financial life. And normally we trust people that we think are acting in our best interest. But what if these people are not acting in our best interest? What the banks really think is that because we have to trust them, we cannot trust somebody else. So they don't believe that a company like Celsius can exist, because who would be crazy enough to give their coin?
This is the entire sales pitch of crypto, by the way. It's been a multitude of things, but one of the big things is that, hey, this is decentralized currency. It's not going to be tethered and restricted by governments, oppressive governments. We hate governments. We're all ANCAPs around these parts. So, hey, you should invest in this. Also, we don't have all the problems of the banking industry. We don't have all the problems of Wall Street. We don't have all the problems of the stock market. We're unique, okay? We operate by our own rules. That's why. This is all cool. It's technology, space, Mars, Elon Musk. You get it.
Their crypto to somebody who's not a bank, right?
That is Alex Mashinsky, the creator of Celsius. He's critical to understanding the collapse of Celsius. And the first thing you should know about him is that he claims to have done a lot in his career. We can get a glimpse of just how many businesses Alex has had in his lifetime from a 1999 article which says this. He tried importing urea from Russia, selling Indonesian gold to Switzerland, and brokering poisonous sodium cyanide excavated from China for use by gold mines in the US. Now, all of these businesses failed, obviously, but the point is he's always been selling something, and probably the biggest thing he's been selling is one of his claims that says that he's the person who invented VoIP. Voice over the internet protocol, something that I know you've used before, even if you've never heard of it. Things like WhatsApp use it. But this claim, it turns out, is actually a little bit exaggerated. Alex Mashinsky says he's one of the inventors, but all the records I could find on the history of VoIP suggest he wasn't the first to do it or even a key inventor at all. He has a patent that goes back to 1994, but VoIP was already a thing by then, with an app called Rascal in 1989. And he wasn't the first to monetize it either. A company called Vocal Tech was the first. But as you'll find, Alex doesn't let an inconvenient truth like that stop him. Instead, he pitches himself as a central piece of this technology, despite most histories of VoIP not even mentioning him. And this is a pattern of behavior of slightly stretching the truth. He claims, in fact, to be the inventor of a lot of things. He says he has patents that cover aspects of the smart grid, ad exchanges, Twitter, Skype, the App Store, Netflix's streaming concept. You'd think he basically invented the internet, actually. Wow. And in addition to him being this amazing inventor, another core part of his story seems to be that he's also a man of the people, not interested in money, but instead he's interested in fighting for the little guy and taking down mean old monopolies. This is his core pitch about VoIP, and also it's his new pitch today about banks.
So I fought the monopolies my entire life. I mean, I fought the phone companies. I fought all the different people who thought that it was a God-given right for them to charge high rates forever to all of us. And so VoIP was a great example of that, right? Where basically we created a new technology, a new platform, completely decentralized, completely autonomous to the entire phone lines infrastructure, and it rode on the internet for free, right? So the same thing is happening now with money, right? And the first time, this is the first time that you can basically replace the banks. The internet hasn't been able to do it. The first time that the technology, the crypto technology and the blockchain technology can replace the banks completely with peer-to-peer. So we're going from voice over IP to money over IP.
Money over IP. He says that's his new project with Celsius. And I gotta say, MOIP has to be the worst marketing term for something of all time. It sounds like a chronic disease, honestly.
The internet was military, and by ResearchNet scientists, it was the state who did invent the internet. Well, the state and this guy, obviously. And Al Gore. Don't forget Al Gore.
Most people instead usually call it DeFi, decentralized finance, where you cut out the middleman and create smart contracts for little bits of code to replace what a bank might do, like lending, for example. Instead of going to a bank, you can go to Compound or Aave to get a decentralized loan. But crucially, in this DeFi world, Celsius doesn't exactly actually fit.
Clean up your room.
Because it's not decentralized at all.
Telfereth, thank you. He's like a tech Tommy Wiseau. Yeah, no shit. It's Moipin time. I'm Moipin over here.
It's just his company. And this is where things get a little weird. Because when Alex Mashinsky describes what Celsius is in theory, it sounds like he's eliminating banks.
That is the killer. The application of basically eliminating the toll collector is the purpose of the blockchain.
But then when he describes what Celsius actually...
Eliminating the toll collector? You do know that when you make transactions in cryptocurrency, there's usually fees associated with it.
It sounds like he is a bank.
So Celsius Network enables you to deposit your coins, it enables you to lend them to someone else, and you get to keep 80% of the value.
I mean, you just heard it. Celsius takes deposits and lends money. That's literally the definition of a bank, according to Investopedia, except, well, for the fact that in this definition, it also says license. And in that one sense, the worst sense of all, Alex is correct. Celsius is not a bank because it turns out they're not licensed to do this. If your bank loses money, for example, it's insured. If Celsius loses your money, well, you're out of luck. And this verbal sleight of hand is a pattern with Celsius. Mashinsky would use words like deposit and withdraw, which sounds like banking terms for a savings account, don't they? But in their terms of service, they explicitly spell out that these aren't banking terms at all. It's not what they mean. Instead, Celsius considers these deposits actually a loan to them, that you are lending to them to then lend to somebody else. And when you withdraw your money, you're not withdrawing from an account you own, you're calling your loan due, basically. And it turns out that's a pretty big difference. The other big trick they did was convincing people that, like a savings account, they said their Earn program, where you could get up to 10% a year on your deposit, they said it was low risk, incredibly low risk, as seen in this clip.
Bitcoin pays dividend. Try Celsius.
How does Bitcoin pay a dividend?
6.2% dividend. Because we earn yield.
How do you earn?
Because we earn yield. We're Moipin over here. Come on.
Yield on Bitcoin. What do you do to generate income on that Bitcoin?
I'm happy to spend an hour with you.
Yeah, you're trading it. You've got to be taking a tremendous amount of risk. The Bitcoin itself doesn't generate any yield.
It does. Just like any other asset can generate yield. Gold.
No, but what earnings does the Bitcoin generate?
Gold generates 5.
Okay, so if he's comparing Bitcoin to gold, gold, yes, does increase in value over time. Bitcoin is highly unstable, as we've all seen. I know there's the argument made by crypto bros where they're like, the line still goes up. You'll see it go like this, and like this, and like this, and like this, but it's still trending in an upward direction. I mean, it still is technically worth more now than it was when it started, and if it's dropped to about $18,000, it's still, I mean, Bitcoin used to be able to buy for $2,000, so the joke's on you, essentially. But if you're using that as the basis for generating yield. If your yield is going to be generated on speculation of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, yeah, that is probably the definition of one of the riskiest business ventures and one of the riskiest things you could throw your life savings into, especially being run by this moip over here. If this fucking moip is the one who's going to be taking your money, your hard-earned dollars, and then generating yield with it to make you more moip, well then, yeah, you probably have a problem.
5.5% at Celsius yield.
No,
Tokenized
what
yield.
are you doing to generate that? You must be taking tremendous risk to generate those returns.
Well, that turned out to be a huge lie. They were taking tremendous risk. Now, I spoke with a Celsius insider who, on the condition of being anonymous, told me that, quote, they were kind of degenerate in their DeFi pools. So it turns out they were taking tremendous risk, according to their own people. And I also spoke with a crypto sleuth called Dirty Bubble Media, who's been tracing these actions a long time before it fell apart to understand more. And I asked him, how is it possible that Celsius could earn 10% or more on their crypto? Here's what he told me.
Essentially, they were engaging in some fairly risky practices, essentially taking borrowed assets and lending on them multiple times in order to try to maximize the yield. And most of their yield was likely coming from stablecoin loans. At least their claims are that they were making these large loans of stablecoins out to like institutional traders who were engaging in undescribed or undisclosed activities that somehow generated the returns sufficiently high enough to make these 10% or higher payments.
One way I had heard it described was that people thought they were investing in a bank with Celsius, but actually they were investing in more like a hedge fund. Do you sort of agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that describing them as a hedge fund that was playing with retail money is probably a fairly charitable way to describe it, but they definitely weren't operating like a bank.
So I know you looked at their DeFi wallets. What kind of returns did you see them getting there? Did you see them getting like 10%, 12%, 15%?
No, not at all. So what part of their strategy was using DeFi to access stable coins. So for example, they would borrow Ether from their customers. They would then deposit that borrowed Ether into, say, Compound DeFi protocol, and then use that as collateral to then borrow stablecoins against. And then from there, the stablecoins flow out all over the place. And that's something that trying to track that is very difficult. But essentially, I mean, that
hedging crypto by lending crypto and then borrowing crypto. Holy fuck.
It actually costs them more money than it makes.
This is absolute
first
chaos.
They're paying interest rates out to their customers to borrow the Ether. And then they're also paying between 2 to 3% to those protocols to borrow the stable coins in over collateralized manner. So it was actually costing them money on the part of the part that's actually visible to us on the blockchain.
So they're making all these bets, some of them risky, and I guess you found that some of these didn't exactly pan out. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so there were a couple mistakes that they've made that I found, and there are probably others as well. One example of that was this thing called Stakehound Ether, which, to get into it's a little bit complicated, but essentially they were using this service to take some of the customer Ethereum and deposit it to this ETH2 contract, which is something that has to do with Ethereum switching from proof of work to proof of stake. The long story short is that the money that goes into this contract is locked. So you can't access it for a very long period of time. It's indefinite, at least until the switch occurs. So what Stakehound allowed you to do was they gave you a derivative token that you could then kind of keep playing with and use to, say, borrow against or lend out. And for a while, the market was treating that as equivalent to Ether. The problem was that Stakehound actually lost the keys to over half of the Bitcoin or the Ethereum Ether that they had deposited. So essentially what happened is the crypto that they gave them is locked up for essentially forever unless the keys can be found. And the STETH derivative token that they were using to kind of stand in for the Ether that they had deposited basically is worthless now. So it was a massive loss. I mean, we're talking tens of millions of dollars. Another example was this Badger DAO hack, which happened several months ago. Essentially, it was like a phishing attack. They were participating in this Badger DAO protocol. They ended up losing $54 million of wrapped Bitcoin.
Wow, that's a lot of money. But there's also a side of this, which is the incompetence of Celsius, which I think a lot.
It's like losing your password on a massive scale. Yeah, but like it's also like losing your password, and at the same time, it's just some team of people doing a whole bunch of really foolish shit and incredibly high risk moves in the background with your crypto savings.
A lot of customers didn't know about at the time. Explain that.
Yeah, so Badger DAO,
like losing,
in order to try to
losing everyone's
salvage the
passwords.
situation, came up with a plan essentially to reimburse people. And it's a little bit convoluted, but essentially the way it worked was that the DAO gave the victims these tokens called REM Badger, so reimbursement Badger. And the only requirement was that they had to hold those tokens in their wallet or in the Badger DAO protocol for a period of 2 years as these.
Okay, I've got a solution to all this. I've lost all of you millions and millions of dollars, but here's what we do. I invent a new cryptocurrency, and then you get your money back in the form of that cryptocurrency. You just can't sell it, so hold on to it for 2 years, at which point the value will probably be at least, I don't know, 2,000 times more moip. Like, I've moiped the moip on this one, and it's highly moip.
Rewards were paid out over time. Unfortunately, and I haven't got an explanation as to why this happened, but a few months ago, Celsius actually removed all of those REM Badger tokens from that deposit account. And essentially that means they lost the right to get any more reimbursements from the DAO.
Why did they remove the Badger tokens?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine.
So it's literally stupidity is what you're saying.
It was a mistake. Well, so the mistake is so egregious because there was actually a warning screen that would pop up and say, if you do this, you are forfeiting all of your reimbursements from here on out.
Tens of millions of dollars just lost because of a stupid basic mistake.
Yes.
See, it's stories like this that appear to be something of a microcosm for Celsius, a small example that shows a much deeper problem. Problems like growing too quickly and having bad executives. See, Celsius, by the time of their collapse, was almost at 800 people. Mind you, this is only like a 4 to 5 year old company. And just in the past year, statistics showed they grew their staff by 281%. You can just not onboard people this quickly. They were growing too fast and trying to scale too fast as well, and ultimately it looks like they paid the price. Remember that this is supposed to be a budget bank passing on the savings to their customers, unlike, the big traditional finance banks. But with this many employees, it's not clear how that's even possible. I mean, they were likely spending somewhere between $10 to maybe $50 million per year just on employees. And again, this might not be a problem if they were hiring star employees, but the opposite actually seems to be true when we dig into it. Here are a few examples of what I mean. Their chief financial officer, for example, got actually arrested while working for the company under money laundering charges. Their chief revenue officer also got in trouble when he started a business with a convicted money launderer while at the company. And then you also have their head of lending, a 24-year-old whose face I will blur for privacy, who turns out to only really have been in the industry for 4 years before she worked as an adult actress before coming onto Celsius, and then moved into a marketing assistant position before becoming the head of managing hundreds of millions of dollars of loans. To have someone with only a few years of experience handling hundreds of millions of dollars of customers' money is just always going to be a bad thing. And once again, the insider that I spoke to at Celsius agreed that this was all sort of...
Yeah, that definitely sounds like an entry-level position. This, it's calling it the Wild Wild West is so true. Because it's like, everything that is taking place right now with this company, it would be unfathomable, in the regular markets or the regular world. But here, it's just like, well, I mean, we get yield. How do you produce yield? By yielding. Yeah, we moip.
Par for the course. They called it a, quote, story of incompetence. That's literally how they described this whole company. But of course, you wouldn't know about that, would you? If you just listened to Alex Mashinsky, who describes his company in much different terms. He describes it as safe and, of course, totally solvent. Only days before they froze all their funds, Alex was still going on AMAs saying stuff like this.
Are our funds safe at Celsius? Can you
better to hire an experienced adult performer. They'll know how to handle finances a lot better. True.
address that for the audience?
Yes, so not just that they're safe, again, we provided anyone who wanted to withdraw partially or fully. There were no problems. I know people are concerned about the whole market, and they were specifically concerned with the Terra Luna situation that we've publicly stated many times. that we didn't lend to them. We didn't buy Luna or UST. We were not like many others who invested in the project. We didn't have any exposure to that.
2 days before everything went under, he said that he lost his voice and was unable to attend an AMA and said he had to reschedule it. And honestly, all indications point to the fact they knew what was going on and chose to hide this fact from their customers, who they knew were...
I love that. Oh, I lost my voice. I can't do the AMA. It's like, did you lose your fingers too? Because you can go on Reddit right now and do the typed out AMA. Just saying.
Going to get screwed, because remember that customers were not depositing, they were loaning to Celsius. This was an unsecured loan, meaning that when everything goes belly up, well, too bad. You're going to be the last one to get paid as one of the, regular retail investors. On the other hand, a lot of the loans that Celsius did have from other big companies like Tether, who they reportedly borrowed $1 billion from, these were collateralized loans. So Tether boasted the other day that they had no exposure to Celsius's collapse and just liquidated them. It's also worth noting that Tether is a massive shareholder of Celsius. Go figure. So once again, the big guys get out fine and the little guy gets squashed. And so it's at this point that we have to say Celsius looks pretty much unsolvent, especially if they got liquidated for almost $1 billion. They've lost money on Badger DAO, on Stakehound. They're losing money everywhere, and everyone wants their money back at the same time. Now, I know things are getting heavy. As I said, Celsius looks insolvent from top to bottom, and there's been talk of them trying to find some way to sort this all out. But I find it very ironic who they turn to in their time of need. This fake bank that sees the big banks as bad guys. You know who they turn to when they're finally admit that they screwed up? They turn to Citigroup.
No way.
A bank. That's right, ladies and gentlemen.
No way.
We all just appreciate this fact that this fake bank, which was claiming to, be saving the people, is now turning to a real bank in their time of crisis. You just can't make this stuff.
Their entire white paper was shitting on banks. That was the entire sales pitch. It's like, hey, by the way, banks are fucking over the little guy. We get it. We want an alternative to this. Everyone, Celsius is the answer. Oh shit, we're insolvent. Okay, we need a bank to bail us out. Save us, banks! Banks, save us!
The funny part of this whole story, because I do have to say there is some bad news, which is that Alex Mashinsky looks like he's walking away with let me check here, millions of dollars. How is that possible? Well, because of Celsius token, the crypto token they built around their company, also known as Cell. When it started, it really didn't do much. There was no real customer demand, but through some clever manipulation and incentives, Alex managed to get himself some real demand for this token that pretty much has no reason to exist. To understand how that's possible, you have to start by knowing that Alex Mashinsky was just sort of given a lot of these tokens to start, obviously. He's the largest individual owner of Cell, but he can sell them whenever he wants to.
You know what's funny is that this already happened on The Simpsons a while ago. The whole we hate banks. Save me, banks.
Science. What's science ever done for us? I'm paralyzed. I just hope medical science can cure me.
There it is, right there. This is the CEO of Celsius.
And of course, the problem is, why would you buy this token that he automatically has a bunch of money in if it's not going to give you a share in the profit of the company? Well, they thought of a brilliant way to sort of create demand out of thin air. So you know how you can invest your crypto in Celsius and earn a yield, right? Well, it turns out that if you'd simply accept your payment in Cell tokens instead of, let's say, your native cryptocurrency you deposited, you'd be paid extra money, extra interest, which is pretty ingenious because it makes people start to get into your token. But it wasn't just that they did. They also added something called a loyalty program, where if you held a balance of their native token, you'd get extra rewards on your interest, with the platinum level giving you 30% more.
The exact same thing as Crypto.com did. Thanks, Matt Damon.
On your interest payments. And if you think the degeneracy stops there, well, of course, you're wrong, because they go even further. The next layer they added onto that is that you can actually stake your Celsius in their earning program as well and earn interest on your interest with bonus interest. Is everyone following that? That's the way Celsius inflated their coin's value, which frankly sort of had no reason to exist except to give their founder a way out of the token himself. And sell it he did. Alex
Cool and
Mashinsky, it
normal.
turns out, was sort of constantly selling this sell token. And I spoke to Dirty Bubble Media about this once again, and here's what he said.
Yeah, so Alex's selling was kind of a focus of a lot of my work. There was a total lack of transparency around it. I mean, Celsius
so a rug
often
pull.
would kind of tout
He was
their
doing a rug pull on top of
transparency on
everything
things,
else.
but when it came to these sales, he would admit that he was selling some tokens, but would never give a specific amount. So based just on the numbers that Celsius itself provided, they have a list called the top 500 holder list that they would periodically update. That was the top 500 holders of this sell token. It looked like there were several million tokens that were sold by Mashinsky over a period of about a year.
What is the rough US dollar kind of equivalent of that?
Tens of millions.
So he's walking away basically even more rich than he was before, and his users are walking away what seems like maybe bankrupt.
Very possibly, yes.
Wow, that's heartbreaking. When I later went to the insider I'd been talking to at Celsius and asked them what they thought about this whole situation, they told me sort of a similar sentiment. They said 2 words: it's over. So even though I don't like to give bad news on this channel, despite what everyone thinks probably, I do have to agree. I think Celsius's time as a fake bank, LARPing as Robinhood, is coming to an end. Ironically, they ended up screwing regular people way worse than the real banks ever will. And it's become a huge cautionary tale to not just listen to people because they're saying what you want to hear. They told people that financial freedom was just an investment away, that they would do all the heavy lifting, and all you had to do was sit back and unbank yourself by banking yourself. And unfortunately, that's just kind of where this story ends. I know it's a bit of a bummer today, guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
No, that was a great episode. I don't know. I don't have any money invested in Celsius, so it's easier to watch than someone who's watching this and thinking, "Oh dear God, why did I invest in Celsius coin?" I was like platinum tier. Oh no. But also super shitty that these assholes keep getting away with this shit. Like, this individual is pulling a massive scheme that, again, if you were doing this in open markets, if you're doing this in regulated markets, you would think that the SEC would be all over this. Like, if you were a bank, like a real bank, you know, then there would be a lot of questions.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form. Available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we are prepared to embark on a mighty jihad in your name. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your humble jester, attempting in vain to get you to laugh. To our valiant knights of the Round Table, Benji Arnie, Tech Tink, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Mayred, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood. It doesn't matter what I believe, it only matters what I can prove. Egbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Daniel Sutton, Coulter Smith, Jenna Tao, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, The Tim Caucus, Multimondi, Trevbot, EXE, Brian Ephraim, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojack, Saren 42, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Agent NDN, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Zach Christensen, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We raise our mugs and salute our brave heroes off to another glorious conquest.